You're listening to the Fizzics Ed podcast. For hundreds of ideas, free experiments and more, go to fizzicseducation.com.au. And now, here's your host, Ben Newsome.
Putting on a science festival takes a lot of effort, and today's guest certainly knows all about that. Vanessa Barratt is from the Australian Botanic Garden in Mt Annan, but she has worked on a ton of festivals, both small and very, very large, with upwards of 5 to up to 10,000 people attending, with many, many, many stakeholders involved as well. You're going to get a lot out of this chat. You'll find out what it just was like to engage not only science communicators and teachers with the public, but bring on the scientists themselves who do the actual research. We go into what works, what doesn't work, and actually, funnily enough, we end up with another quote towards the song. Don't worry, be happy.
This is the Fizzics Ed podcast.
Yes, it seems like there's going to be a recurrent theme with 80s and 90s songs coming into this podcast. But look, welcome. My name is Ben Newsome from Fizzics Education, and welcome again to the Fizzics Ed podcast. In this session, you're going to get a lot out of the knowledge that Vanessa Barratt from the Australian Botanic Gardens can share when it comes to running science festivals. She has had a lot of experience over many years, not only running science festivals, but being a teacher in a classroom, as a science communicator in multiple museums. And look, she's got a ton of knowledge, and I really hope you can get a lot out of this. She's done work not only with Australian Botanic Gardens, but she's been a community and programs education leader for Centennial Parklands. She's managed the public programs and the postgraduate recruitment for the University of Sydney. She was a science communication project officer for the Australian Museum. She was a science communicator for the Natural History Museum out of London. She's worked for Taronga Zoo. She's done a bucket load of stuff. Look, she's a good friend of ours for many, many years, and I hope you get a lot out of this. Enjoy.
You're listening to the Fizzics Ed podcast. Why don't you book us for a science show or workshop in your school? We love seeing students get excited about science, and you will too. Go to fizzicseducation.com.au and click on schools for more info.
Okay, hi Vanessa. Welcome to the Fizzics Ed podcast.
Hello, Ben.
Hello, Vanessa. Okay, so probably a bit of full disclosure here. I've known Vanessa Barratt for many, many years, and hence she gave me a funny look when I said hello like that.
It's nice to meet you.
All right, no worries. So, Vanessa, obviously some people will have run into you around Sydney and various science events and things, but there are going to be people listening who have never heard you before or don't know what you do. So, Vanessa, what do you do? What is it? What gets you going in the morning?
So I'm Vanessa Barratt, and I would call myself a science communicator. I started off studying science, thinking I was going to work in science, and have gradually moved further away from the world of pure scientist to more into science education and science communication.
Okay, so what are we actually doing in science prior to communicating it?
So I when I was in high school, I wanted to be a vet, and I was obsessed with animals, and I was ready to apply for veterinary science. And then luckily I got a job when I was in year 11 at a vet, and suddenly realised that I did not want to be a vet, that what happened there and the things vets do is not what I was interested in. And in fact, I found it quite traumatic, some of the upsetting things that I had to do related to animals. So I started to switch, and I met someone who was studying zoology, and she was really similar to me, and that was enough. That inspired me. I thought, I really want to study zoology. Funnily enough, my teachers at school were really against me doing that because I wasn't really as good at science as I was at English and languages and arts subjects. So they were really trying to push me into a more of a communications or journalism type of degree. But I held my ground because science was my interest. And as it turns out, that was the right decision, but there needed to be a few steps along the way.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, obviously, you don't have to just give up animals completely. I mean, I know you look after a bunch of them.
Yeah, and that was cool. So that's the other thing. I didn't actually know what you did with a zoology degree. I think I probably did picture myself like swimming with dolphins and rescuing turtles or something. I wasn't really sure. And I certainly wasn't aware of how hard it was to get a job and how much further study I would have had to do after my bachelor's degree, and even just getting my foot in the door with research projects. So I finished my science degree. I was still working at the vet, and then not long after that, I just started seeing jobs come up, like where you were teaching kids about science. And I got this weird job travelling around New South Wales and actually Victoria and Tasmania teaching a rainforest show. And I was going to a new school every day. And it was so fun. It was hard work because I had to drive a lot and I was on my own. I had this car full of stuff. But it definitely gave me my first taste of what I would call science communication. And that was really the end of it for me. I thought, this is what I want to do.
Fantastic. And obviously, roll forward to today. I mean, it's certainly not your first day doing science communication. No. What is it that you're actually doing right now?
So this has probably been one of my most challenging jobs. I've been working at the Royal Botanic Garden in Sydney, and its two sister gardens, Mt Tomah and Mt Annan. We also include Centennial Park in that mix. I work as the science communicator. This job's only existed for a year and a half, and I was the first person to be in this job. I already worked in the gardens and Centennial Park, and I was aware of the science, but I knew they needed a lot of help. They lacked profile. No one really knew what the scientists did there. Mostly even the internal people didn't know what the scientists did. And they were starting to lose momentum with their funding. And, yeah, I think there was a really big need to bring in some support, people with other sorts of skills, and help them get the word out about what they're working on and why it's important.
These type of science engagement events obviously drive not only just visitorship, but also just learning about what is it that your organisation actually does. I mean, I know one of the things that you were heavily involved with was the Science in the Swamp program.
Yeah, so Science in the Swamp, well, if I'm going to be completely honest, that started as a kind of every time a grant comes up, we would apply for it and we would find something to fit that grant. And the National Science Week grants come up every year, and they're quite an attractive amount of money. And we thought, what could we do in the eastern suburbs that isn't already being done? And we just went with the simple format of a free family day, and it got the funding. This would be the 5th year that Science in the Swamp's been running. And I think the other reason it worked and it attracted funding and it attracted support, it wasn't about us. We weren't trying to spruik ourselves. We were just basically a place where all of the local science groups and science communication groups could come together and do something. And it's really fun. It sort of started off that way. It was just fun. We were all enjoying being there together, and it drew a massive crowd and continues to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Science in the Swamp program is unreal. I mean, I've seen massive walking around dinosaurs, I've seen fish in aquariums, I've seen a whole bunch of science for kids in preschool. I mean, what a great event.
Yeah, it's been great, and every year we've changed it. We've tried to adjust it to different themes that Science Week might be having, or international themes, just to keep it always something new so that families keep returning. I think it's got to that point now where people know it's coming up in the calendar. There's a bit of loyalty there to come back every year and see what's new, but also to see their old favourites, like physics, education being one of the old favourites. There's a lot of people there who've just stuck with us year in, year out, and people just love it. They look forward to it.
Oh, that was fun. And obviously festivals are in your blood. I mean, you do so many events and things. I mean, what's basically been coming up this year even?
Yeah, so look, we've just had this big challenge. So we had Science in the Swamp, and then Centennial Park merged with the 3 Botanic Gardens, and I really sort of switched to a position where I'm trying to create a profile for the botanists and the plant scientists I work with. So we've had to be super creative and thoughtful about how can we get these guys out in the public eye, get them mixing with kids, encouraging people to find out what they do, understand what they do. And the reason it's been so hard is because what they do is pretty complex, and it's not necessarily obviously practical or obviously relevant to people's everyday lives. So we've had to be so creative. One of the events we've got coming up this year is called Botany Distilled, and I thought what could be more obvious than mixing botany with alcohol?
Of course.
Yeah, so we thought, we just know people will come to that, and most people don't stop and think about the science behind making alcohol and how related that is to plant science and a knowledge of plants and the way you make alcohol from plants. So we've got these great partners who make wine, beer, gin, and they're plant experts. They are botanical scientists in a way. So we've got them coming to do an event, and that's fantastic. People will come to the Botanic Gardens, have a drink, have a taste test, but actually learn about the way that you can extract alcohol from plants.
Absolutely. And I mean, I know it's odd talking about this in an education podcast, but certainly we do have to talk about fermentation of alcohol and chemistry and biology. You actually spruiked an old memory of mine. I read an old book. I'm going to get the title wrong. We'll throw it in the show notes later. But there's a great book. There's a green cover called The Drunken Botanist.
Oh, I have to read that.
Talks about just actually how they do the science of making alcohol. Not just have the usual rye and potatoes, but cacao and papaya and everything.
You can do it with just about every plant. And the thing that hasn't really been examined is using native Australian plants, and that's because that's our main area of interest. That's what we're trying to explore. So this gin company came to us a few months ago and actually asked if they could harvest plants from within the Botanic Gardens and create a gin.
Yeah, wow.
It's called the Royal Botanic Gin, and so it's actually literally made from the plants within our garden. And people just love that, especially there's a very strong connection between people and the Botanic Gardens. They feel like it's their place. And for me, I've actually realised that the plants within the garden itself is probably our best storytelling feature if I want to get people finding out about our science.
Storytelling's where it's at, and trying to make the hard science seem accessible is really the key in this sort of work. And I've been across some schools that actually run their own events around community and all the rest. I mean, if you were in a school and they charge you with, hey, let's get an event on to show what the kids know, I mean, where would you go? Where would you start off with?
You mean in regards to plants?
Or anything, really. Like, imagine like if you're teaching within the school and knowing that, hey, we've got this group of kids that want to show what they're learning with the community around them. I mean, what are the sort of things that you might have seen with student-led type projects? Yeah,
well, I actually, look, they never cease to amaze me, because the thing that I realise about kids is they're in a totally different world to the one that we're in terms of their comfort with technology, their access to information. You know, I could only dream of having that kind of information available to me when I was a kid, where, you know, like the science nerd, which was what I was, being able to just go on the internet and research their own topics and make their own ebooks and make their own films. And they contact us because they want to interview scientists for their project, and they're not just talking about the old days where you just like type up an assignment. They're literally making podcasts and stuff like that. So I actually feel like some people worry that science is losing like the interest of kids, and that kids possibly don't want to become scientists anymore. I don't see that. I think they've got access to so many resources. You almost just have to give them the space to pursue the interests they have, because all kids have some kind of scientific interest. You give them the space, they've got the tools, they've got the creativity and the skills that I wish I had. They can go away and make amazing things. Some of the videos and stuff I've seen kids making about science topics, you know, filming their own experiment over time and then stitching it together, they just amaze me. If I had to pay an agency to create that kind of stuff for me, I'd be paying thousands of dollars, because no one at my work knows how to do it, but the kids do. So, yeah, I actually just think it's giving priority in the classroom to science, showing your personal passion and seeding that so that they just roll with it.
Yeah, kids can come up with some wicked stuff. I mean, you can check out YouTube or whatever your video channels that you like. It's stunning.
They're really killing it. It makes me really curious about what the future is going to look like using technology to tell stories, what they're going to do with that talent and knowledge and skill.
You've been doing this for quite a while. I mean, what's the most awesome science thing you've got to do in front of children?
Oh, geez. Look, it's just a bit of an obvious answer, but I worked at the Natural History Museum in London, and that was just a bit of a dream for me. It was a place that I'd always read about in books, and if anyone had said to me, you're going to get to work there and, you know, walk amongst the collections and go behind the scenes and meet the scientists who work there and give the public access to those scientists and the collections, that's just quite unbelievable. Having said that, once I was there, I also realised that the museums in Australia are just as good, and that the scientists in Australia are just as good, and that a little bit of my ideas about, wow, this is the kind of pinnacle of science communication is it's a little bit false, because I was really happy then to come back to the Australian Museum in Sydney and see that they were doing some possibly even more innovative things. They weren't resting on their reputation as being such a famous place. And if anything, the Natural History Museum has a curse because it's so old and traditional that people don't like it when they change from that.
Right.
Yeah. When I was there, actually, we were working on a brand new exhibition, a brand new centre, the Darwin Centre, which was meant to be a modern version of the museum. And they built this huge, 3-story cocoon to house the collections. And there was a virtual tour that you could go through there. And it was quite amazing to see that no one went in there.
Right.
So people would literally skid to a stop at the end of the wooden floorboards of the old part of the museum, and they would turn around and go back in and not enter the new part of the museum. And I just noticed, people want to see the old museum, they want to see the dinosaurs, they want to see the bones, they want to see the old cabinets. And that's not their expectation when they go to that museum to see the new stuff.
Fascinating, because I was only just talking with Isabel Kinsley the other day. Those people who want to check it out, just go onto the podcast, just look up for Isabel Kinsley having a chat about her PhD around informal science education and what people take away from science shows. And I bet you that's almost a PhD in itself, even in psychology.
Oh, it really got to me because I'd been hired to work on that space. We had all this stuff set up in that space, we have daily shows with the scientists. We had a biodiversity centre where you could bring in specimens that you'd found and you want to get ID'd. There was so much stuff in there. We honestly could not get people to go into that area. And I remember just standing out in the main hall, going up to people, inviting them in, offering to walk in with them, show them how cool it is. There was so much resistance. And I wonder now, that was a few years ago, I wonder now how they've overcome that, what they've done to try and increase the foot traffic through to that new part. But they definitely learned something about their audience that they possibly didn't know before.
Yeah, I remember when I first started doing this, someone once told me two things. They said, first, know your audience. Secondly, you're only as good as your last show.
Well, isn't that the truth and a shame? Yeah, I know you hardly get any time to enjoy the success of the last thing you do. We find that at work all the time. We roll out all these cool things and the next day we're on to the next one. But the Darwin Centre, the other thing that it really challenged is this whole new idea where you always have to have this interface between scientists and the public. So they also put a lot of the scientists' labs and collection desks where they worked right next to the glass so people could look in. And I think you would pretty much declare it a failure because, again, the scientists felt really uncomfortable working in that way. And so did the public. Yeah, and they felt uncomfortable. Okay. Everybody did. So, look, I've thought about that coming back to Australia and seeing that constant push to open up the scientists to the public, constantly forcing them to be together. We're about to open one of our research facilities in the Botanic Gardens with a slight sort of public-facing element later this year, our plant pathology lab. I'm really nervous to see how it's going to play out because we've gone from no interface between the public and our scientists to this first attempt to open up a lab, have people be able to walk in, look through the windows, a bit of interpretation. It'd be really interesting to see how the experience goes for the scientists and for the public.
I wonder whether, and this is just purely a thought bubble, so no references, resources, or even really prior thinking prior to now.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is a similar situation that occurred a few decades ago when schools started to open up. It started to show what happened within a school.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. I can see why it happens.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and of course there's pros and cons, and maybe it's just the adjustment period of people getting used to it because it's so different. I don't think I still think it's the right way to go because the world we live in now is that everyone expects to be able to find what they want to find out and see what they want to see, and
preconceived notions.
Yeah, and I mean, in our case, a lot of our scientists are funded by the taxpayer, so I feel like they have that right to know what happens, what goes on. And I do still think there is no better way to show the science than to actually physically allow people to see it with their own eyes. But there are many ways to do that. And to come back to technology again, we could be utilising that better.
Oh, true. With permission and the right space, you could easily even just just use Periscope or YouTube Live and just stream it out if you wanted to in the right space.
And hasn't that shown how simple, like, Periscope's been massively popular and surprisingly so, because it's sort of pretty rustic.
Yeah.
But I watch, like, Costa and people like that get on Facebook all the time with their little videos, and before you know it, there's thousands of people not only watching but all talking to each other and asking questions, and it's kind of nice to know that you can just do that with such low resources.
And it breaks down barriers. When you're not someone on a pinnacle of expertise, they are people.
Yeah,
they have heartbeats, and they're interesting.
Right, and they're just kind of winging it.
Yeah.
Like, you can really tell they're winging it. It's always pretty funny, the stuff that happens on there. We're actually, we're about to try that.
Yeah, right, cool.
It's on the cards to get some of our scientists just doing some spontaneous kind of interviews from where they're working or out in the field.
And then what comes up, and they're often talked about in classroom, about being authentic. Authenticity is an issue, and what comes with that is showing everything, warts and all.
It's true, because for kids as well, like, I don't know, Ben, what school experience like got you on the career that you're in now, but I know for myself, I can distinctly remember meeting scientists as a school child, and they're just normal people, and, you know, a mixture of different backgrounds, genders, ages, normal people. Being normal. And I just remember that. I remember them, and I remember thinking, oh, wow, I would love to do what you do, and it's obviously accessible to anyone.
Yeah.
You have to create those opportunities for kids to see people who they can relate to, who they think they could be, and what better way to do that than in person?
Yep.
And also that local element. Does it? Look, you've heard me, Ben, complain before about when we always pay all this money to bring people from overseas to tour around doing science talks, and there's this big thing. Oh, if they're from America or if they're from England, they must be so great. I'm just so dead against it, because I really feel like we have all the talent we need in this country, and we have to show kids that Australians are doing all of those things. We're represented at the top of science in every field. And we have to promote our own people.
Yeah.
So it's exactly the same in the local area. I love the Scientists in Schools program, which we participate in, because you're just drawing local scientists into schools, giving kids that chance to meet.
Some of the best sessions we've done is so simply like we might have run a workshop on, I don't know, geology or whatever it is when we visit the school, is when the teachers have asked us, hey, can you spend half an hour and we'll do a breakout session with the grade and we'll just have a chat. And having a chat was
best,
great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, you know, everyone has this thing they do when they're on stage where they kind of change.
Yep.
Like, we've all got our teacher voice or our stage voice or our
podcast voice or whatever it is that you're doing.
Voice, exactly. But when you're just talking to kids and, you know, relaxed in a relaxed setting, it's just, that's when the engagement and connection happens. Yeah.
I guess, obviously, on the flip side, if you're not talking that way, obviously it's going to be a real, you know, bad time on stage. No one's connecting with you whatsoever. Actually, that just brings up the point, like, whether it's in a classroom, on a stage, any sort of event or venue, have you ever just seen it like, you just see the train coming, you can see that this class is going bad, and it's going bad real fast.
Oh, so many times.
I'm always curious about this, and people have listened to these previous episodes. I always ask something around this question, because I think we learn a lot from failure and actually acknowledging it, and it doesn't have to be yourself or whatever. What have you seen happen where you go, you know what, not going down that road again, and this is why, etc.?
Yeah, look, we've all been there. We've all felt that rising panic when you've sort of lost control, and sometimes you think you feel worse because it's your fault, because you think maybe I didn't prepare well, or I've turned up late, or I've left something in the car. But yeah, so when it's your fault, you just feel like, oh, how have I allowed this to happen? There was something that happened that was like a career turning point last year, which was the big event we organised at the Australian Botanic Garden for Science Week. It was called Jurassic Garden. You know, I learned so much from that event. I dragged about 30 of our scientists out and set them up on little tables with all of their stuff to talk to kids about what they do. And on the other hand, there was another range of activities, including science toys and dinosaurs and things for kids to do. They literally all filled themselves up with sugar, ran around like crazy things, chasing dinosaurs and making fossils and watching things explode. Then they came over to my group of introverted, scientists who'd never done public engagement activity in their lives, had made no effort to make their tables interesting or engaging or accessible. Like, literally, some of the things were up so high the kids couldn't even reach. The microscopes were not designed for kids. It was just a disaster waiting to happen, and I hadn't realised how much I should have intervened beforehand to prepare them.
Yeah.
And make sure they had cool stuff that kids could relate to. One of the scientists told me this really hilarious story. He's a liverwort expert. So, you know, works with these ancient plants that are really small and hard to see, and they don't have flowers or anything. He had them all laid out on this table, and this kid came along and just looked at him and pointed to them all, and he went, pointing to them all along the table. And then he said, boring.
Oh, boom. Life's work down the oh man.
The guy like acted it out for me later, like after the event had finished, and then told me, I'm never doing this again.
Wow.
And I got all these emails from them saying, we're not kids entertainers. How could you make us feel like that? No one spoke to us all day, even though there was 5,000 people at the event. We felt like idiots. We put a lot of time and effort into our tables. We'd set up all this stuff and no one looked at it. You know, I'm still recovering from that because I thought, I've done this for so long. I'm so good at this. I got you the numbers. Why aren't you happy?
Yeah.
But, you know, I had to learn and be humble and apologise to them first of all.
Yep.
Which I did, and there was a lot of grovelling and a lot of time because they all got together as well the next day and all like debriefed and really built up their case as what a disaster it had been, which is so funny because it's not how everyone else saw it. Everyone else thought it was a great day. So for this year, I've had to approach it completely differently and realise it's my job to prepare them, help them set up their activities, even set expectations for the public and for the scientists about how this is going to go. And then also realise that some scientists are just not cut out for this. They don't have to do it. Yep. They shouldn't have to do it. If it's so uncomfortable and awful, there's other things they can do.
There's so much to learn from that. And actually one of the reasons why I wanted to get into this podcast, because that's the thing that really, really grabs people's attention is just because you can do everything perfectly, sometimes when someone fails in something, they just stop and that's it, or they only do it once. Being able to get up, dust yourself off, slight tweak, what they call, I think they call it in business a pivot. Pivot and go again.
It's hard though, isn't it? Because, I mean, I tell you what, after last year, a couple of staff left as a result of that event.
Really?
Because the fallout, like, we all suffered. We got complaints on Facebook. All sorts of things happened.
Because there's so many people who are involved.
Yeah, people didn't get to come. We got complaints from staff. It kind of felt like, why are we doing this? Everyone's upset with us and we're just trying to put on a fun science event for kids. But the weird thing is that the government federal government funded it last year. This year we're getting some state government money. Everyone from the external people all want it to happen again.
Yep.
I was like, no, I'm not doing that to myself initially. But enough months have passed. The pain has subsided.
The wounds are healed a little bit and you're ready to go.
But, you know, also, the funny thing is when I went to talk to the scientists about it again, I thought they'd all be like, no. But they've obviously had time to think about it as well.
Well, they're bright people.
Yeah, they're super bright people. They really do know that they need to get their work out there.
Yeah.
They've also had time to get to know me and know that I wasn't trying to cause them...
Set them up or whatever
set them up for failure. Because I suppose that's what it looked like.
Yeah, got it.
It looked like I put them next to all these super entertaining, expensive kids' activities and designed the whole thing that way. Look, we're going to try again.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, in August this year, and we're going to do it in a way which we've thought about carefully, which is we're going to actually have a day for the scientists and a separate day for the crazy fate-style family events and just do it separately. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's right.
I've just accepted there's two audiences.
Yep.
And there's two groups and they don't have to be on the same day.
Yeah.
And why fight it?
Makes sense. And that way both audiences are happy, both presenter types are happy. It's not just being about tenacious, it's about working out what will work and what won't.
And I've effectively doubled the number of people who can come because now we have 2 days, lots of 2,000 parking spots.
Out of the ashes.
Well,
It wasn't that bad. It was a fantastic event. I must say, I was at Jurassic Park, and obviously we were doing the whiz-bang fun stuff, and of course we had a fantastic day. But I could completely imagine if you were sitting there next to giant bubbles and slime and all this cool stuff, and you're showing liverworts, it's a little hard. And to all the liverworts experts out there, I really do respect what you guys do. It's just a real... it's a tough gig. I mean, you know it. I mean, I've been in these situations. You walk in and you know full well this is going to be a tough gig.
Yeah.
I mean, we part of our role at Fizzics, not just doing school programs, we do kids' science parties. And there are times where I've walked in and we're about to do some science experiments, which we think are fairly good. I mean, we brought liquid nitrogen and all this stuff. It's all going to be fun. And then you're competing next to a jumping castle. And it's just, what do? You got this big, bright, colourful, loud thing.
And the kids are running around the back garden. The parents are not at all interested.
Yeah, it happens.
It's all down to you to try and get them to come and listen to what you're doing. Yeah. Oh, I just hearing
like
you
an
say
arms
that,
race.
Ben, I get that sinking feeling in my stomach.
You know it when you walk in, and actually teachers, presenters, because we do this on a daily basis, we really know when we're walked into a storm. It
You
just
really
happens.
do, and it never gets easier.
Yeah. Though, flipping it on its head, sometimes it's like this has been set up well and you might have mispitched, misrun it.
Yeah, well, that's true as well. And it's nothing wrong with going, you know what, I don't think these kids are going to sit through the 10 experiments I had planned.
Yep.
I'm just going to change it all and just maybe do 3 of the best.
Oh, so that's Classroom 101. Be fluid, work with the people.
Yeah.
If they're not interested, geez.
Don't force it.
Yeah.
When you're younger, you think you have to. You think
Yeah.
you've got this obligation to get through a certain amount of information. And it's funny because that's what I've noticed the scientists I work with are like. They feel like they've failed if they haven't explained the technical information that they set out to explain.
Yeah, got it.
And, you know, I said to them, you need to just stop putting that pressure on yourself that every opportunity needs to be, we've just learned 3 things. Like, just the fact that they met you, just the fact, maybe the kid just learned to use a microscope.
Right, weird thought bubble came to my head. I know for a fact now, what I do know now is that when I was a kid, about 7 years old in Townsville, I know that I was exposed to a science party. I know I was because I know I still have...
They existed?
Weird, or maybe they weren't meant to exist, I don't know. But I know that what I'd seen, looking back on it, was someone had frozen a squash ball with liquid nitrogen and thrown against the wall, and it had shattered. And of course, it's like the worst thing to do, by the way, because if you do that, shards of hard things that are very cold are going to fly at your audience, and that's a bad thing. But I know that this has occurred because I still distinctly remember picking up said shard of very cold, minus 196 degree rubber, and looking at my hand going, oh my God, you just shattered this squash ball. And I know to this day that that's what actually happened, that was the experiment I'd seen. I remember nothing else. Geez, I was 7 years old.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. The take-home can be much less. I mean, a lot of experienced teachers know that a lesson may only get 10 to 15% of anything to a kid sometimes.
Yeah, we just need to relax a little bit more and realise the different forms in which the impressions are made.
Yeah, that's it. And
they remember the person a lot of the time.
Oh yeah, and often it's often what you don't say that matters.
Yeah, and that's right. And like we all know for ourselves, sitting through lectures or whatever, how much you absorb and how much you care by the end.
Yep.
And sometimes it might be better just to stop and let them chat to you or ask questions and, kind of stop with that one-way traffic of information going forward to the kids.
So if you had someone who was just about to graduate university, about to start their science teaching career or working in a museum, what sort of advice would you give them? If you had to give them one.
Well, I guess this draws back to the beginning of this whole discussion because I didn't know anything about this industry or what opportunities there were for me. So what I would say now to anyone who was back there, like I was, just finishing uni or whatever, is that you've got such an amazing career ahead of you and so many opportunities, and just to sort of seize the day, because I think you just get so obsessed worrying about, am I going to get a job or what am I going to do or where's this going to take me? You really don't need to worry about it. If you're a dedicated, passionate person in this industry, there are going to be so many amazing things for you to do, places for you to work, people for you to meet, opportunities for you to use your talents. I suppose I'd probably just say not to worry about it so much and let it happen. Yeah.
Don't worry, be happy.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about...
Did you really just quote
yes,
Bobby McFerrin?
Believe me, I bet in one of our previous episodes, we crisscross jump came up.
I'm glad that we got Bobby McFerrin.
Oh, yeah, why not? Dear. So look, thank you very much for coming along. Now, obviously, it'd be great if people want to connect with you and find out more about what you do and things like that. How can they get in touch?
Oh, well, I'm on LinkedIn. I know that's a bit of a nerdy thing to say, but I'm on LinkedIn.
Yep.
I think I'm one of the only ones on there that's doing this job. So, yeah, definitely find me on there. I think that's probably the best way.
Sure, that's fantastic. And look, what we'll do is we'll put that link on the show notes as well so you can find it. But look, Vanessa Barratt, thank you very much for coming along, and don't worry, be happy.
Thanks, Ben.
See you later.
Bye.
This is the Physics Ed Podcast. We're all about science, ed tech and more. To see 100 fun free experiments you can do with your class, go to physicseducation.com.au. That's physics spelled Fizzics, and click 100 free experiments.
Isn't Vanessa just so down to earth? I mean, obviously, I've known her for years. She's a very good friend of mine. However, the ability just to say how things are, whether they went well or didn't go well, it's such a skill, and it's just humbling that people can just say things like that and learn from their experiences. And I was so happy to have her on the podcast, and I hope you got a lot out of this. From this, I'd like to go into the top 3 learnings I had from this interview, and no doubt you would have more to go through this as well, but here are my 3 at least I took away straight away. So firstly, don't rest on your reputation. It's so easy to get blinded by a shining logo that this is the most important place to visit, the most important place that does outreach or does whatever the marketing spiel might be. Speak with anyone that's teaching science. It doesn't have to be a major museum, zoo, aquarium or whatever. There are fantastic educators in high schools, schools, preschools who are doing unbelievably good stuff. They just haven't got a massive marketing brand behind them. Having said that, of course, there's some brilliant people within the museum that Vanessa visited over in the UK. But like she said, the own museum that she was working with in Sydney was doing fantastic stuff too. So the old adage of, you're only good as your last show. It's certainly something we've always thought about when we present our presentations. The audience and your own class students will appreciate that as well if you go that way. My second tip for this is work with your stakeholders. Now, wasn't Vanessa so frank about how things just didn't go perfectly to plan with a major event that she ran in August in 2016? However, picked herself up, dust herself off, and said, let's just make it bigger and brighter for next year, and certainly has done a fantastic job to start working with her stakeholders, with her scientists in her organisation to get things going. Now, of course, listeners here who are educators in a school might be thinking, oh my gosh, is this for me? Do I open ourselves up to a potential failure? It doesn't necessarily have to be that bad. Just start slowly and, just work out what your people who are getting involved in your event might be able to do. What are their fears? What are their concerns? And try to really come up with a plan that will at least mitigate most of these issues. And to be honest, most people learn from experience anyway. And finally, we couldn't have, especially at the end of this, don't worry, be happy. I mean, isn't that just the classic way we should be regardless? But trying to track your career path. I mean, so many people have the 1 year plan, the 2 year plan, the 5 year plan. I've spoken with so many company directors and major managers of organizations and principals, and you ask them what are their plans. Some of them are that busy that if it's just next year would be enough. Thank you very much. I think the idea of a vague idea of where you want to go is a good thing, because, that allows you to construct some ideas about how you might teach a particular topic or create a particular project. Obviously, that's a good thing to help guide you, but be flexible enough to just take it as it comes. And certainly, don't worry, be happy is a very good motto. And it's a great 80s song as well. But certainly, if you can, within your organization, sort of just chill out a little bit, things will work as they come along. It can be a good thing for yourself and, frankly, for your blood pressure as well.
Thanks for listening to the Physics Ed Podcast. Love your science? We do too. Here's this episode's education tip of the week. Grab your pencil and get ready to make some notes.
So here's a quick tip you can implement straight away in your classroom. Now, when I mean quick, I mean properly quick. In this case, I'm talking about a science meme. Now, just first up, what's a meme? It's an image. It's a picture. It's a cartoon. It's some photo from a movie or a still caption at least, which people type stuff over the top of. I had students tell me maybe it's a meme. They were really adamant it was meme, and I thought it was meme, and now I'm confused. But I'm going to call it meme. No doubt you've seen them on social media like Facebook and Twitter and that type of thing, where you see this image and someone's typed over the top of it. And why would you use it in your classroom? So firstly, I encourage you to go into Meme Generator or Meme Creator or Image Chef. There's a number of free platforms where they've got a whole bunch of stock images, which you can type your titles over the top of the images and then use them in your classroom. Why would you do this? So, for example, if you had this set up on your interactive whiteboard or on your data projector, you could have a simple meme, or so again, just a picture with some typing over it, which will convey a message incredibly quickly. For example, there's a classic meme of a still out of Lord of the Rings. I think it's Boromir, sort of holding his fingers, looking very, very thoughtful and prophetic almost. And one does not simply forget that today is lab day. It's a simple way to start off your lesson. Or if you want to go a little bit further, you could say there's another one which is Batman and Robin. So cartoon Batman and Robin. It looks like a 60s cartoon by the look at the way that cartoon's done. In this case, Batman's kind of slapping Robin. So Robin, wake up to yourself. But in this case, Robin does need to wake up to himself because he says, I'll just taste a little sample of this to see what it... And then clearly Batman's slapped him and he says, never eat anything in the lab. So there's a lab safety meme just there. Or you could get a little bit passive aggressive and you could have an image from The Matrix where Morpheus says, what if I told you the answers you seek are in the lab instructions? Look, you can have a bit of a play with this. I mean, obviously it's a bit of fun, and look, where you have fun, you have kids smiling. When kids are smiling, they're engaged. So there's a quick tip. Go on to Image Chef, go on to Meme Generator, Meme Creator, whatever platform that you can find memes to be created on. Create a quick account. They are genuinely free. And within 30 seconds, 1 minute tops, you can quickly just put a caption over the top of an image that you think represents what you want to discuss and shove it on your classroom and see what kids think. Try it out.
This is the Physics Ed Podcast. We're excited about science. Grab a copy of our new book, Be Amazing, How to Teach Science the Way Primary Kids Love, from our website. Just search Be Amazing Book. It's available in hard copy and ebook. Go to physicseducation.com.au. That's physics spelled F-I-Z-Z-I-C-S.
Yes, and within that book, there's quite a bit of information that you can use in your classroom for sure. And look, one of these things that can certainly be useful in your classroom is making a little bit of a mess. In a past episode, we were talking with Maddie Scott-Jones and Luca Parry from the Education Changemakers. And Maddie had a bit of a thought around, well, how kids just love to get messy and why this is actually somewhat useful in your classroom.
Have to be something that would make a lot of mess, I think. I can't think of a particular example.
Bring out the slime, eh?
But yeah, just, I think it holds us back sometimes from going out and doing something really wild and exciting. It's just, thinking about how much clearing up there's going to be afterwards. But we really need to sort of break through that barrier because you've got, essentially 30 little hands or, 60 hands that can help you clean up afterwards as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Come on, make a mess. Look, it's not that bad. I know there'll be some people shuddering as you walk the dog or in the car or however you listen to this podcast. Look, making a mess in a classroom, there is some value. It's not restrictive. I would just suggest with your lessons, definitely see if you can build in some time that kids can clean up. Don't just yourself or a lab assistant or someone else has to clean up. There is learning in this. I mean, to run a decent science lab, you need to clean up after yourselves. Not only is it a good thing for your co-workers, it's also a safety issue. Kids need to learn, and the earlier they learn, the better they can do this. I definitely encourage you to check out that recent episode and, well, get a little messy.
Thanks for listening to the Physics Ed Podcast. Sign up now for our fortnightly email newsletter. It's loaded with details on new experiments you can do, STEM teaching articles, new gadgets, exclusive offers, and upcoming events. Go to physicseducation.com.au. Scroll to the bottom and add your email.
And this brings us again to yet another episode of the Physics Ed podcast. Look, I'd love you to connect with us. Jump on the website. Yes, we can't spell very well, so go to Physics Education, spelled FIZZICS education.com.au, and you'll find a heap of stuff that can help you in your teaching, and if you're in a museum, presenting programs too. So you'll find there over 100 articles in our blog on how to teach science in multiple different ways, whether you're into drones or science apps or science memes or whatever it is that you're into. You'll find nearly 150 science experiments which are freely available on our website as well. You can check that out in the top heading of our website. There is that brand new book which has come out, Be Amazing, which is specifically designed for primary teachers, though we are finding a few high school teachers are using this too. So next week, you'll find us talking with Jackie Randalls. Jackie Randalls is from the Inspiring Group out of Australia. So if you haven't heard of Inspiring Australia, it's a federally funded program to get science out into the public. So whether you're in preschool or in a retirement home. So Jackie Randalls is the New South Wales Inspiring Australia officer, and she's got a heap of experience and connections and knowledge around who's doing what in New South Wales, and we're talking hundreds, if not thousands of festivals, so really tune in for that. And as always, may your science lessons be fun, make them informative, and please grab your students' imagination. My name's Ben Newsome from Physics Education, and you've been listening to the Physics Ed podcast.
You've been listening to another Physics Ed podcast. We're excited about science. Subscribe to us on iTunes to download the next episode as soon as it's released. And don't forget, for hundreds of ideas, free experiments, our new Be Amazing book and more, go to physicseducation.com.au.